Hey there, movement maestro. Ever feel like your body's a walking, talking mystery?
Well, get ready to decode some of those biomechanical secrets because today we're taking a deep dive into how you actually move.
You've sent in a bunch of physiotherapist level multiple choice questions.
Which means we're dealing with some serious anatomy action here.
But don't worry, we're going to translate all that complex stuff into something super interesting, even if you haven't looked at an anatomy chart since, well, ever.
That's right. We're going to break it down so you can walk away with a whole new understanding of the incredible mechanics happening every time you bend, twist, or even just take a step.
I love it. So where do we even begin with unpacking something as intricate as the human body in motion?
It's like trying to explain how a watch works, but the watch is also doing yoga and eating a sandwich at the same time.
Great analogy. And, a good place to start is by understanding the different planes of motion.
Think of it like learning the language of movement, the grammar that dictates how our bodies move through space.
Okay, planes of motion, I'm intrigued. But I'll be honest, the only planes I usually think about are the ones I wish I was on, headed to a beach somewhere.
I hear you, but these planes are a bit more grounded, literally. Picture your body as a three-dimensional object, and now imagine three invisible lines intersecting it.
All right, got the 3D model of me in my head, now what?
The first line slices you right down the middle, separating your left and right sides. That's the sagittal plane.
So if I were a magician's assistant, and the magician didn't read the instructions correctly, that's the plane I'd be divided in, right?
Hopefully you'll never have to experience that, but you've got the idea. Now think about this. Every time you bend forward to tie your shoes, or even just nod your head yes, that movement is happening in the sagittal plane.
Okay, that's actually pretty cool. Suddenly, I'm hyper aware of all the sagittal plane action going on right now. What about the other planes? How's my body divided there?
Next up, we've got the frontal plane, also known as the coronal plane. Imagine that same magician, but this time the line runs from ear to ear, dividing you into front and back halves.
So all those side-to-side dance moves I attempt, usually with mixed results, those are all in the frontal plane.
Exactly. Cartwheels, side lunges, even just raising your arms out to the side, those are all examples of movements happening in the frontal plane. It's all about that side-to-side action.
2 planes down, 1 to go. Hit me with the last one.
The final plane is the transverse plane. This one's all about rotation. Imagine a line slicing you horizontally, separating your top and bottom halves, like a magician's stage, but again, with a much happier ending.
Okay, so far so good. No dismemberment required for understanding anatomy, but help me visualize this transverse plane in action.
Think about turning your head to look over your shoulder, twisting at your waist to reach for something behind you, or even doing a pirouette like a graceful ballerina, or, like you're attempting a graceful ballerina move.
Okay, now things are clicking. So we've got front and back, side to side, and twisting. It's like our bodies have built-in GPS systems for movement, navigating through these different planes.
And just like a GPS helps you navigate through traffic, understanding these planes helps us make sense of movement, especially if we're talking about things like sports training, injury prevention, or even just understanding how our bodies work on a deeper level.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like having the blueprints to your own movement. But speaking of blueprints, what about these lever systems I keep hearing about?
It sounds a bit like our bodies are giant construction projects.
You're closer than you think. Our bodies are incredibly efficient machines. And just like any good machine, we rely on lever systems to amplify our strength and range of motion.
Think about it without levers. Even simple tasks like lifting a weight or bending our elbows would be incredibly difficult.
Okay, I'm starting to see the mechanical genius here. But I have to admit, when I see these multiple choice questions about first, second, and third class levers,
Questions 3, 5, and 12, to be exact, my brain goes a little blank.
can you break it down for me?
Absolutely. Imagine a lever as a rigid bar that pivots around a fixed point called a fulcrum.
In our bodies, our bones act as the levers, our joints are the fulcrums, and our muscles provide the effort to move the load, which could be our own body weight or any external object we're interacting with.
Okay, that's a pretty clear picture. Now, tell me more about these different classes of levers.
What makes them unique?
Let's start with a first-class lever. Picture this. You're at a seesaw in the park.
The seesaw itself is the lever, the pivot point in the middle is the fulcrum, and you and your friend on either end are the effort and the load, trying to balance each other out.
In our body, nodding your head yes is a great example of a first-class lever in action.
Wait, really? So my skull is the seesaw?
Exactly. Your skull is a lever, The joint at the top of your spine is the fulcrum, and the muscles at the back of your neck provide the effort to lift your head up against the weight of your head, which acts as the load.
It's all about that balanced pivot point in the middle.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. My mind is officially blown. So where do these second-class levers come into play?
Is that like a double seesaw for extra fun?
Not quite a double seesaw, but a good way to think about it might be a wheelbarrow. Think about how you use it. The wheel acts as the fulcrum, the effort is applied to the handles, and the load is placed in the bucket.
In the body, a classic example of a second-class lever is standing on your tiptoes.
Okay, I'm seeing the connection here. So my foot is the wheelbarrow, the ball of my foot is the wheel, and my calf muscles are putting in the effort to lift me up.
You got it. The foot acts as the lever, the ball of your foot is the fulcrum, and your calf muscles are contracting to lift the weight of your body, which is the load.
This time, the load is positioned between the fulcrum and the effort.
Fascinating. So with first-class levers, the fulcrum is in the middle, and with second-class levers, it's all about the load being in the middle. What about third-class levers? Where does the effort come in with those?
That's the real mind bender. Third-class levers are the most common type in our body, but they're also the least mechanically efficient, at least on paper.
Wait, our bodies are designed with an inefficient lever system. That doesn't sound very, I don't know, evolutionarily advantageous.
I'm starting to question everything I thought I knew about how we ended up with opposable thumbs.
I know, it seems counterintuitive, but there's a brilliant reason for it.
Think about bending your arm like you're showing off those impressive biceps. Your bicep muscle is contracting, pulling on your forearm bone, the lever, to lift the weight of your forearm and whatever you're holding to load.
Your elbow joint, that's the fulcrum. See how the effort is stuck in the middle.
Okay, I'm seeing the pattern here. So we're trading raw power for something else with these third-class levers. What's the trade-off?
You hit the nail on the head. While they might not be the most powerful setup, third-class levers allow for an incredible range of motion.
Take that same bicep curl. A small contraction of your bicep translates to a big sweep of your hand through space. It's like trading a powerful but short-range cannon for a precise long-range laser.
That's actually a perfect way to put it. We're not just strong, we're agile and precise thanks to these third-class levers.
And that makes me appreciate the ingenuity of our anatomy even more. But I'm also realizing that all this talk about levers has me wondering, how do our muscles actually work together to create and control all this movement?
It's not like each muscle's acting solo, right?
You're so right. It's a total team effort. And it's not always about muscles flexing to create movement. Sometimes it's about them restricting movement.
Hold on, muscles putting on the brakes.
Which sounds kind of strange when you think about it.
Tell me more. This is where things get really interesting.
Well, look at question 4 on your list, the one about the tensor fascia latae and how it can impact the knee.
Right, that one threw me for a loop. I always thought tight muscles just meant I needed a good stretch, but it's way more complex than that.
Way more. If that tensor fascia latae muscle, it's a long one running along your outer hip, if that gets too tight, it can actually pull your kneecap out of alignment.
And hello, knock knees, not to mention potential pain and discomfort.
Okay, that's both fascinating and slightly terrifying. It's like our bodies have all these intricate checks and balances that can get thrown off if things aren't quite right. So it's not just about strengthening muscles, it's also about making sure they're balanced and working in harmony.
You're catching on quickly. And that brings us to another fascinating example from your list. Question 14, and the surprising connection between your calf muscles and ankle flexibility.
Oh yeah, that one was a head scratcher. The triceps surae, wasn't it? So that's the back of my calf. And it somehow controls something called dorsiflexion.
To be honest, I'm blanking on what that even means.
No worries, it's all about the terminology. Dorsiflexion is simply the fancy term for bringing your toes closer to your shin. You're essentially flexing your foot upwards.
Okay, got it. But what do my calf muscles have to do with that? Shouldn't that be all about the muscles on the front of my shin since they're the ones being stretched?
That's where the concept of agonist and antagonist muscles comes in.
It's like a perfectly choreographed dance-off happening in your body with every single movement.
Okay, now you're speaking my language.
Yeah.
I'm all about a good dance analogy. Break it down for me.
So in this dance battle, the agonist muscle is the one leading the charge, the one primarily responsible for the movement.
In the case of dorsiflexion, that would be your tibialis anterior, which runs along the front of your shin.
Right, so when I'm trying to show off my incredible ability to point my toes towards my nose, that's my tibialis anterior strutting its stuff.
Precisely. But here's the catch. While the agonist is busy doing its star turn, the antagonist muscle needs to chill out, literally. It has to relax and lengthen in a controlled way to allow that movement to happen smoothly.
So, in the case of my epic toe pointing routine, my calf muscles, the triceps surae, I'm trying to use the technical terms here, they're the ones playing the role of the gracious loser, bowing out so my tibialis anterior can shine.
Exactly. It's all about finding that sweet spot between effort and relaxation, between pushing and surrendering. And when that balance between agonist and antagonist muscles gets thrown off, say, if one muscle group is too tight or too weak, that's when you run into problems like poor movement patterns, limited range of motion, or even pain.
It's like one dance partner trying to steal the show while the other one's left fumbling.
Wow, this is all making so much sense. This deep dive is giving me a whole new appreciation for the intricate coordination happening beneath the surface of even the simplest movements. I'm never going to look at a dance battle the same way again.
And that's what's so fascinating about biomechanics. It's not just about memorizing muscle names. It's about understanding how these incredible systems interact to create the magic of movement.
Speaking of magic, weren't there some seriously cool, fun facts sprinkled throughout these multiple choice questions? Like that thing about our hands and how they relate to a closed fist?
You're talking about the MCP joint being in full flexion when your hand is in a closed fist, right? That's from question 6.
It seems so obvious, but when you think about all the tiny bones and muscles working together to make that happen, it's pretty mind-blowing.
Totally. And wasn't there another one about our necks being like the Ferraris of the spine? That one really stuck with me.
Absolutely. Question 27 pointed out that the cervical spine, your neck, basically has the highest ratio of disc thickness to vertebral body weight compared to the rest of your spine.
That thicker disc to vertebrae ratio allows for incredible mobility, which makes sense considering how much we rely on our necks to move our heads constantly.
It's true, our necks are like our own personal periscopes, constantly scanning the world around us. Okay, last question before we dive into the practical applications of all this amazing knowledge. What was your favorite fun fact from this set of multiple choice questions?
Oh, that's a tough one. There were so many. But I think I have to go with the fact that our knees naturally rest at a slight bend, about 25 degrees of flexion, as mentioned in question 25.
It's like our body's built-in shock absorber.
You mean to tell me that all this time, when I thought I was standing up perfectly straight, my knees were like, nah, we're going to hang out at a slight angle, thanks. I'm starting to think my body has a mind of its own.
In a way, it does. And that slight bend is actually a good thing. It helps absorb shock and reduces strain on the joint, especially when we're moving around all day.
It's like having a little bit of give in the system.
Our bodies are seriously amazing. It's like we're walking, talking feats of engineering. So, what's the key takeaway for our listeners today? What's the big aha moment they can walk away with? It really is. It makes you want to high-five your own body, like, hey, good job with the shock absorbers and the levers. You're a masterpiece.
Right. And it's all connected, right? We were talking about levers, how they can actually change the way a movement feels, how hard it is.
Oh, yeah, you mean how holding a weight further out makes that bicep curl feel like you're lifting a small car instead of a dumbbell?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's because you're basically lengthening that lever arm, making your muscles work harder for the same movement.
It's like a sneaky way to level up your workout without even needing heavier weights. I dig it.
And on the flip side, if you're feeling sore or have an injury, you can use those lever principles to your advantage too. Just shorten that lever arm to make the movement easier. It's like built-in biohacks.
Mind blown. Again, this whole deep dive has been one aha moment after another. But I gotta say, knowing that I can tweak things like my grip or stance to make my workout more or less challenging, that's pretty powerful stuff.
It is. And it's not just about exercise, right? Understanding these biomechanics, it can help you move better in everyday life too. Maybe you find a way to lift that heavy grocery bag with less strain.
Game changer. Who knew anatomy could be so practical? This is why I love these deep dives, always coming away with new insights and a whole new appreciation for this amazing human machine we're lucky enough to be walking around in.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So keep those biomechanical wheels turning, folks.
And until next time, stay curious about your movement.